the model itself, when it's fully integrated, is guaranteed to produce exponential growth.
Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the 10x Mindset podcast. And I'm super excited to be here today. Now, before we start with today's episode, if you haven't gone through the first episode, please go through that. It's available on the channel. One of the things that we explored in the last episode was that what is the context of this podcast, but more importantly, what is the 10x outcome that you're working with, and what are some of the things that you want to achieve out of being on this journey with us. So if you haven't done that, do that so that you can explore some of the questions, you can explore some of your outcomes, some of your vision, and so on. Today is going to be about you getting the overview of the 10x model. So what is this model? How does it work? What are the different components of this model that we've been speaking so much about? So today you're going to get an overview of it. We'll eventually, in the coming episode, break down each component and each element as well. And any thoughts from you?
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. It's one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is just how all these elements work together. It's a very interconnected model. It's not like a step by step. It does follow a sequence, but they all work together. Ultimately, I mean, if you look at the ultimate goal, to embody the model in such a way that you really gain access to your essential self. And I think that's what people talk about when they say, I really want to get in touch with who I am. Right. And the who I am is not the core identity level, it's the essential self level that we're talking about. And we'll talk more about that because the essential self is the foundation of the model. And then the model kind of flows from that. So maybe we just start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the overview, I mean, if you were to share, Gene, in terms of what is the 10x model?
Yeah. So the 10x model is what I would call a way of thinking about and acting on kind of the world around you, including yourself. So this has to do with both the internal set of representations that we have, the kind of our worldview, if you will, and how that worldview, that mindset influences our actions in the world and the outcomes that we produce. And one of the things about it is that the model itself, when it's fully integrated, is guaranteed to produce exponential growth. And kind of like the basis, we can go very high level on this, but the basis on that is that if I ask the 10x question, which is how do I 10x this and whatever this is, and I answer that effectively and then act on that answer, I create an outcome. That outcome we call 10x outcome. And when I've done that, it's then important to integrate it because we recognize that you can have the idea about all this stuff and just be dissociated, and it kind of just passes by. It's interesting, it stimulates you, but it doesn't actually become operational. And so integration is all about making it operational in your life. But then what happens is that the way we describe that is that what was once a 10x outcome becomes 1x. In other words, it's the present state, which now allows you to ask the question again. So how do I 10x this? What you're effectively doing is you're 10xing a 10x outcome. And that's how it becomes exponential, because if you chain those kinds of processes over time, it's a guarantee that you compound the growth that you're engaged in. And that's what leads to exponential growth. So we see that having a framework that allows us to think about life and action in this way is a, if you will, a format. In NLP terms, it's a strategy, a meta strategy for exponential growth.
So one of the ways that I would think about it would be, if I take an example of the past, that there have been times in my past where I've produced extraordinary results. And then there have been times in my past where I haven't. Underlying presupposition is that it comes from what's my worldview in that moment? how am I experiencing life? How am I experiencing the worldview? What's my perception of the world in that moment? And how am I organizing my thoughts and what do I believe in
Yeah.
and so on. And one of
Yeah.
the things that we can do with the 10x model is that it helps us create a worldview. It helps us
Yes.
create an internal representation where we're more likely to produce exponential growth and exponential result.
Yeah.
And then we keep
Yeah.
multiplying it, and then of course over eventually the idea is that that's who we become. We
Yeah.
we become
That's right.
have that as an identity where we experience life to grow to see
Yeah.
extraordinary changes and differences.
We can get into it, but that is the basis for having what we call its index core identity, which is an expression of our essential self based on exponential growth. And yeah, and the other kind of qualification I would say is that it doesn't devalue 1x because we recognize that 1x maintains stability in our life and it's everyday life rituals and habits that really sustain us and one type of foundation for that. But that when we have a 10x mindset to go with the model, that we actually look for ways to create exponential growth. And that's what you're talking about in terms it just becomes a way of being. And that so we're constantly looking for and paying attention to how we can grow, how we can help other people grow, how if we're in a company or organization, how we can help it grow in healthy ways. And so of course we recognize that you can have healthy growth or unhealthy growth. And so we really are focused on healthy growth as being an expression of our essential self. And also in terms of what we call structural coherence, that that the model can apply to us as individuals, it can apply to our teams, it can apply to our companies, our communities, and beyond. So NLP Global Summit, for example, is a system, and when we apply next to that, it too can grow exponentially, as it has. I mean, you're a great example of that.
Yeah. Mm. Good. So in terms of the model, what would you say what the model is?
Yeah, so that's a great question because that really is foundational to what we want to share with people. So the presupposition is that we everyone has an essential self. And that essential self is we can experience it. We know it to be true. There's an intuition that we carry about ourselves. It's always there. There's no fear there. There's no judgment there. It's basically all the healthy aspect of who we have been created to be. And we recognize that as we grow up as children, have experience, life experience. We have parents that give us messages. We have schools, coaches, etc., so that we develop a series of self-limiting beliefs. I mean, most children are not blessed with, a series of empowering beliefs. Most kids end up having this kind of a mix that in some ways they recognize what's good about them, but in many ways they also are challenged by what they think, oh, I'm not enough, or I could have done that better, or something like that. They're very much judged on their performance. And what they intuitively know, what we intuitively know, is that we are not our performance. We are, in and of ourselves, we have value. And of course, that value is foundational to being able to live a generative and ultimately an exponential lifestyle. And so that's really what the model helps us to do is to get back to kind of that core foundation of who we are, to know that about ourselves and where we are aligning our intuition about what we already know with how we perceive the world and how we act in the world, and the kind of results we create in the world. So it's a very generative and ultimately exponential growth model, and the foundation is that presupposition of our essential self. The model itself is based on 5 components, and the first one's what we call core identity. And the idea of that is that our essential self gets expressed through multiple core identities, some of which are established and are just unconscious, many of which are waiting to be established. And so within the model itself, making what I call a being level decision, I am 10x, is a key step in integrating that model, embodying the model. So when I make that kind of decision, it's non-negotiable, irrevocable. This is who I am. One expression. It's not all of who I am, but it's one expression of who I am. That I then operate on the rest of the model from that identity. And the premise there is that identity generates behavior which produces outcomes consistent with that identity. So if and when I have a 10x core identity, I think, and next step is the 10x mindset. I think in 10x ways. I look for 10x outcomes. I'm proactive in pursuing these things, and that is an expression of my essential self. Now, we can have multiple core identities. And one of the things I like about the concept is that when we have a core identity, it basically makes us more efficient in the world because it removes noise from the system. So a lot of the confusion, conflict, whatever about who we are comes from these self-limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves and about the world. And so a core identity limits that significantly. But if I just go through the model quickly, and then we can come back and look at the components. The first one is a 10x core identity. The second one is a 10x mindset, which gets generated as a result of a core identity. So if we have other core identities, for example, I am generosity, will generate a generous mindset, or I am healthy. Well, I am health itself. It will generate a mindset that sorts for health. So it's that kind of thing where the identity generates the mindset. Mindset is what we perceive, what we interpret, and then how do we apply that? All right. So that's all about our worldview and perspective on the world. But we also need more than just having a mindset. We also need ways to translate that mindset into action. And that's what we call the 10x TOTE. This comes out of neuro-linguistic programming, and TOTE stands for trigger, operate, test, exit. Basically, the idea is the engine, really, for generating outcomes of any sort, but particularly 10x outcomes. And so the idea is you have a present state and a desired state, and there's a gap between those. When we become aware of the gap, that's the trigger to initiate this strategy, if you will. And the goal is to reduce the gap between present state and desired state. And the way we do that is in terms of that model is a series of operations. So these are the change strategies that affect our present state, move us into our desired state. Once we get to the desired state, and there's always being this comparison is always being made, how close are we to actually getting there? So once we get there, we then make the decision, oh, okay, I've done that. I exit from it. I go on to something else. That is as I was saying, that's the engine of the model, the tote. And then the fourth component is the 10x outcome. So one of the ways to think about this is when we ask the 10x question, how do I 10x this? And we get an image, a vision, a goal. That is, and we'll come back to the criteria for what establishes that. But by being able to establish a goal and make that goal an outcome within the 10x tote, the engine of the tote moves us toward accomplishing the goal. And then finally, there's the 10x future. And that really is a container for possibility. And one of the things that we think about that is that there are many more possibilities that we can generate than we actually have to manifest. But the more possibilities we create, the more choice we have, the more options we have. And so being able to choose between great 10x options is that in itself is part of what the model offers, which is it challenges us to extend ourselves and to create horizons in our future that are beyond what may seem possible right now. But what we've discovered is, and in fact, some of the people that we worked with have said, this was a program to make the impossible possible in my life. And the way we do that really is to remove the limitations that we've imposed on ourselves. But I think what I'd like to do is just to go back to the 10x mindset and say there are 5 criteria for deciding on what is a 10x outcome. And the first one is that it takes us into the unknown. We encounter it and we go, and that's this whole thing about making the impossible possible. Well, we don't have a strategy at the moment. We don't know how we're going to do it. But when you work with the model long enough, you begin to embrace the unknown. And you say, I may not know how now, but I trust I will. I have great confidence in I can figure that out. So that's the first one is you enter the unknown. The second one is that you exit comfort zones. So the distinction there is really the unknown is about the external world, and exiting comfort zones is about the internal world. What that means is that we get habitual in our everyday life and our thought processes, whatever. And this really challenges us to say, you know what? I'm willing to be uncomfortable in order to figure out how to enter the unknown and make a difference. And that could be a difference for me personally in a personal growth sense, could make a difference for my family, for my community, for my company. It's a willingness to get beyond the comfort zone. And then the third component is emotional resilience. And that is just the acknowledgement that, hey, life is full of ups and downs, there are pitfalls, there are obstacles, and we need to be able to regulate our emotions and to be able to say, okay, no matter how difficult it is, no matter the fact that maybe I failed on this one, that's not going to stop me because next outcomes are very ambitious and it's not just a smooth journey to get there. And so when you get stopped somewhere, if when you're emotionally resilient, you say, okay, I may not have been able to accomplish it this way, but I'll find another way and I'll continue on until I get there. And that kind of pursuit of that 10x outcome is really a key component of this. And that's where the 10x tote comes in. And then the fourth one really has to do with resources, and that is accessing resources, which can be either internal or external. Internal would be, for example, we all have been successful in a variety of ways, and every success we have in our life has a structure to it. And that structure is a resource. So if we think about, oh, I remember the time when I was in school and I had an exam and I was really concerned about it. And I ended up doing really well at it. For example, when I was in college, my freshman year in college, I was in a math class in which I was totally freaked out about. I was generally pretty good. I thought I was pretty good in math. Oh my goodness. Anyway, our math professor got sick and we had somebody kind of substituting for him to do our final exam. And I met him on the pathway after our class had ended, and all he had graded the papers or whatever. "Oh, congratulations!" So I go, what are you talking about? He said, "Oh yeah, you made a 98 out of 100 on your exam." What? You kidding me? I mean, it totally blew me away. Well, that's an internal resource because I was able to accomplish something that I didn't even realize I had the resources to do. But now I can take that to my present moment and say, I may not feel like I have the resources, but I do. Intuitively, I do have the resources. I just have to call on them. And then, of course, external is people, partnerships, facility, tools, equipment, whatever. Whatever we need to do that. For sure as a mountaineer, you have to have the right equipment. If you're going to go up that mountain, you got to have the right equipment, and that's the resource. And without that resource, you're not going to be successful. And then the fifth component has to do with what we call strategic risk. As without risk, you're not going to accomplish a 10x outcome if there's no risk involved. And there are a variety of those risks. There are all kinds of sacrifices that we have to make, and one of those, for example, is our time. How are we going to spend our time? We can spend our time doing what we've always done, or we can spend our time exploring what we've never done. And that distinction right there is just one example of a risk. There are financial risks, there are relational risks, there are reputational risks. There are all kinds of risks. But we have to be willing to take them and then be emotionally resilient to process through them in order to be successful and have 10x outcomes. So that's a quick run through of the model.
Great. So if we were to put this into the context, one of the ways to think about this would be that I'm going to share an outcome and maybe we can put that into the context of 10x model. And as you're listening to
Yeah.
us, you can also think about what's that one thing that you're working on? What's that one thing that you're creating? And then we can go through this component and the criteria for the outcome together so that you can sort of have an experience of what it looks and feels and here's like for you. So as you were sharing this, Gene, I was thinking about this in terms of creating music since I'm learning guitar. And I thought that's a great place to create a 10x outcome. Because I did think about this. And for me, one of the things is that to be able to do chords and just play music is quite 1x. It's something great.
Right.
I would enjoy it. I'd love to be able to do it. But when I think about 10x, to me, it's like, like for example, to be able to play Led Zeppelin, to be able to play some of their songs.
Right.
And to me, that's 10x. Now, I don't know if I can do
That's
it.
Phoenix.
I don't know
Right.
how to do it. I don't know how long it's going to take me or whether even if it's possible for me. But that's first criteria to kind of go like, okay, it's a bit unknown and I don't know how to get there,
For
but that's
sure.
exciting. I mean,
Yep.
one day just coming on this podcast, maybe I'll play a Led Zeppelin song for you guys in future, a
Yeah.
couple of years
That'd be
down.
great. So 2 points about that. One is the timeline that you're exposing is that 10x can be from momentary to visionary 30, 40 years, whatever. We don't know the timeline for you playing Led Zeppelin, but we know it's not tomorrow. So that is an important distinction that we talk about. And then the other is that you don't know how you're going to get there, but you by committing to it, you actually will get there. And what the commitment to a 10x outcome actually makes it easier to do the 1x. So in other words, playing the chords, which is foundational for playing Led Zeppelin, it makes it easier because you know why you're doing it. So 10x can answer that question: why am I doing this other thing? And it sustains you through the tough days.
Yeah. And I can see myself with other criteria as well. Like I can see in terms of having emotional resilience, for example, because sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes I'm not able to shift chords faster, I'm not able to learn some notes, and it's frustrating. So I can see that it fulfills other criterias. There will be days where it doesn't work, and then that's fine. I can come back to it next day and work on it. So the idea is for me, it does seem like it's impossible. And that's exciting. And that's part of creating your 10x outcome. That what
Yeah.
is it? What is exciting? What is impossible? What is it that will take you into the unknown?
Yeah. Yeah. And what is it that, like you're talking about excitement, it's like having a 10x outcome that energizes you and motivates you to persevere through the frustration or through the failure or through the challenges that we all are going to face. I mean, you're not going to have a 10x outcome where you don't have those. And therefore, the choice of what is that 10x outcome is a really important one. Something that I have shared a lot for me was that my second or third year, I forget which it was, in the summer and at university, I went to Europe and was on a travel study tour as an assistant. And we went to 12 countries in 12 weeks, and it was amazing. I fell in love with Europe. I had this compelling desire to live and work in Europe. Well, the thing about that is getting to Europe is no simple thing. If you want to live and work there, you can go and visit and be a tourist, but to actually live and work there, is that's a pretty substantial 10x outcome. I didn't have the language at the time, but I now know that was. And it took me 11 years to get there. And so that kind of, as you're talking about emotional resilience to recognize, okay, what do I need in order to get there? So one of the things you need is you need to be able to play the chords, smoothly, rapidly, whatever. And as a milestone outcome for your larger 10x outcome. And that would be called an operation in the 10x tote.
So this is what we've spoken about it just in terms of meeting the criteria for a 10x outcome. And
Yeah.
of course, there are other criteria I meet as well in terms of access to resources. I can look at experiences in my life. I can see the resources on the outside as well. I mean, to play like Led Zeppelin, the least I need is a guitar. So,
Well, yeah,
this,
and today, learning to do a lot of things is a lot easier today than it used to be. I mean, you've got YouTube, you've got all kinds of resources on the outside, and kind of what we're talking about is the internal is like motivational and that kind of stuff, and the outside is like, okay, what's operational is one way to make that distinction.
yeah. I mean, today people are able to learn about the 10x model listening to us here right now. So
Yeah,
lots of,
right.
yeah. Uh, okay. But
Let
this
me
is,
ask you a question. When because you have embodied the 10x model. What is it that the 10x model has allowed you to do that you would not have done if you didn't have it? Because it's like a tool. In what ways has that tool given you access to an exponential lifestyle that you would not have had if you hadn't done it?
I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing that I got out of the 10x model was trust, because there was a time where I needed to know things before I would take action. I needed
Uh-huh.
to know if it's going to work. It has to work. I needed to know. And I mean, there's no way for me to know. I mean, it's like me predicting future, but it always stopped me. And one of the things that I experienced more and more after the 10x model is to let go of the knowing,
Yeah.
because it is walking in the unknown. And I have done that many times in the past. I've done that, like I shared in the little bit in the first episode. I've done that when I first did the NLP retreat in Himalayas. It was unheard of and no one had ever done that. But there was no sort of structure to it. And after doing the 10x model and embodying it, now I know that walking in the unknown is just part of living a 10x life. So I don't need to know stuff and I can easily walk into unknown. And that brought a lot of trust for me.
Yeah.
uh, that brought a lot of trust in the process, trust in the system, trust in myself, trust in resources, and trust in my ability to do things. Even if I don't know stuff now, I know that as I move along, I will learn and I'll figure it out. So that's stepping into 10x TOTE. That I'll run
Yeah.
operations that some won't work, and I will learn from those operations, and I'll eventually figure it out.
Yeah. That's right. Oh, that's great.
So part of the magic that also really happens and works with me is like if I continue to think about music but put that in the 10x model, that's when I get goosebumps. Because
Well, yeah.
I mean, the first element is the 10x identity. And when I think about the identity, the first thing I go like, okay, so the identity for me is like I am music, and that's like, woo, that's like being in sync with music, that becoming one with music. And it naturally gives me such a different way to think about
Yeah.
music, as if there is music within me and not something that I'm learning on the outside or doing on the outside.
That's a
Uh,
very powerful insight. I totally agree with you. Yeah. I mean, and it is a demonstration of the embodied Tenexa core identity that you are music. I am music is a core identity statement, and it's fully associated. So one of the problems we have when we're learning or growing is that we dissociate, and that's like I'm going to learn music. Music is something outside of you, right? As you were saying, and yeah, that's fantastic.
yeah. And that that I can experience the shift even when I think about learning music, when I operate from I'm music versus I'm learning music. And that's such a huge difference. I mean, so that has an impact on the mindset, and
Yeah.
then I
Oh, yeah.
run, yeah, all these different
Well,
totes.
there's also a somatic, a body aspect to this. Like what you're saying is when you fully integrate, I am music. It's your whole body is music. I mean, and it's not just that you're playing guitar. It's like you are the instrument. You're playing yourself in a way, in a beautiful, beautiful way. And it's not very, that will shorten the journey to playing Led Zeppelin without question. You don't have to overcome resistance that you create for yourself when you are trying to learn something that you think is difficult to learn. It's not, because you're music. And of course, if you're music, then of course you could be Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know whether you've done that yet, but I think that would be a next step for you, would be to go, I am Led Zeppelin, because then you're not dissociating from it and having to overcome that resistance. You're actually going, no, well, if I'm Led Zeppelin, then this is the music I play.
I haven't done it yet. I think for me, it's a ladder. I think I need to first start with like I am Beatles.
No,
Even-
why? Why? No, 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 no. You don't have to do that. No, no. You can do it. You can make the leap.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I can.
that's up to you, but just in terms of efficiency and speed of learning, if and when you go, I am Led Zeppelin, and you integrate at the same level that you integrate I am music, you will accelerate your progress. And it's not to say it's not like instantaneous, like suddenly you're playing it, but you will accelerate your progress in being able to play Led Zeppelin. It's just the way it goes. And you know that. This show is so good.
Hey, I mean, it seems like this could be a good sort of thought experiment for people to take away from
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
session, this episode, right? To kind of go like, okay, think about an outcome, and in my mind, my outcome is to learn guitar, but that's not 10x. 10x is when I think about that, I want to be able to play like Led Zeppelin. So you kind of go like, think about an outcome and think about what's the 10x in your outcome, and then maybe step into the 10x identity. It's like, for me, it is like, I want to learn music. So I am music. So in terms of what is that core identity, and then sort of see what happens. I think that could be a great exercise for today.
Yeah, I think it's great. One thing I would just say to people about core identity is not a role. So in other words, it's not I am a musician. It is a internal state. Which, and sometimes the language seems a little bit strange. You say, I am music, huh? What do you mean? Yeah. Well, but once you actually begin to get a hold of these core identity statements, they start to resonate as being true, because from that whole body state of I am music, you then can much more easily learn what you need to learn and play what you want to play. And so for people, I would just say, when you think about, like you were saying, I want to learn to play the guitar, and the guitar produces music. But if you take that and you go, okay, if I backtrack to that's the outcome, then what, and the behavior is playing guitar, what is the identity? The identity is associated with the outcome, because you produce music, therefore I am music, right? That logic, if you will, influences how we establish our internal state and our core identity statement, which in this case is I am music.
Yeah. Sure. So so I think that's a great exercise. If we were to first quickly do the recap of the model. So model has 5 components. There is the 10x core identity, which is the exercise or sort of thought experiment that we've just shared it with you. And that X identity produces 10x mindset. And then there is the 10x tote. So that and 10x tote, like Gene shared, the concept comes from NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And in simple terms, it's about running different operations to reach your desired state, to your desired goal. Then the fourth component is around, what's the fourth component? 10x outcome. So what's the outcome that we're working towards? And then the fifth component is the 10x future, the future that we want to envision.
That's right.
Like I said, we've sort of unpacked the outcomes. So what are the criteria to create a 10x outcome? We've sort of unpacked the 10x identity a little bit as well. That, okay, what is that? But in the coming episodes, we're going to take each of these components and unpack it so that you can fully understand them and fully recognize the structure or the process behind each component.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's great. Yeah, that was a great example.
Great. So I'd say that for now, for this week or for the next coming days, do the thought experiment around this. Think about what an outcome, and again, remember the 5 criteria of the outcome that we shared earlier. And then as you think about your outcome, what's the 10x within that? And then what's the identity that's associated with that outcome, and then sort of make your core identity statement just in the way that Gene explained a couple of minutes back, and see what happens.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and one thing that you might use as a resource is to think, remember a memory where you exceeded your expectations and are you really proud of it? And you realize, even thinking about it, I accomplished a 10x outcome. So this is just a way of establishing that we're not asking you to do something you've never done or to be something you've never done. You are 10x, but it's like it's owning it. And so that's kind of like where we're going, is to own it, learn the distinctions, be able to apply the model, and as a result, develop an exponential lifestyle.
Okay, brilliant. So you have the thought experiment around identity, and then you have the question to kind of unpack that. Think about a time, think about a memory, think about an experience in your life where you exceeded your expectation. And of course, always remember to share it with us, share your thoughts, and share your uh, answers and reflections to these questions and your reflections to the thought experiments that you make.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to the next podcast. So please return, and we'll see you there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and see you next time.